Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my show if you're listening to the podcast. I'm Rachel Lang. I'm an astrologer, psychic medium, and a lot of other things. I'm a multi-hyphenate, and that's quite appropriate for today's topic, which is going to be the Gemini Rising. This is part of our Rising Sign series. We're doing each sign in depth and an overview about what the ascendant means. Make sure that you go back and check that out. Today, we continue our Rising Sign series with Gemini Rising. Gemini Rising, you are a communicator, a storyteller, the infinitely curious explorer of life. And if you're a Gemini Rising, or if you love someone who is, this episode will help you understand how this placement shapes appearance, personality, relationships, and even how life unfolds over the different areas of life as represented by the different areas of your chart. Let's start with the essence of Gemini. Gemini is the sign of communication, learning, curiosity, and the ascendant is the part of us that interfaces with the world. So it shows the way that we want others to see us, and it shows the way that others naturally experience us. And when you have the ascendant in Gemini, you have a life that interfaces with the world through language, through talking, sharing ideas, through an intellectual exchange. And so Gemini rising people are often described as very youthful, lively, insatiably curious. They want to experience everything, learn everything, and then talk about it along the way. And, we have Aries rising, which charges ahead, Taurus rising, which builds steadily, and Gemini, because all signs build on all other signs, everything is correlated. Gemini is about learning. It's about experiencing, exploring, trying different things. Gemini risings are going to thrive on variety. And some of this is nuanced by different placements in the chart, in particular where Mercury is in your natal chart, which Mercury is the governing planet of Gemini, also where the sun and moon are. So some of this will be slightly nuanced for each Gemini rising, but in general, a Gemini rising is going to seem like they have something to talk about. They might seem like they're always on the move, rarely sitting still, and they need a lot of mental stimulation. They want to be surrounded by people, activities, and things, events that pique their curiosity. I also find that people I know who have Gemini rising have this curious like mischievous look in their eyes. And maybe there's like something that happens with the eyebrows too, where it's sort of like a little elf-like eyebrow, a little peak, to where you imagine that there's always a joke in their mind or something that they're mulling over. Mercury is the governing planet of Gemini. And Mercury tells a lot about Gemini Rising's personality. It's the main planet that relates to how the world experiences them. Mercury is the planet that relates to quick thinking, movement, it's travel, the road trip. When Mercury is strong in a chart, the Gemini rising has a sharp wit, good sense of humor, a really strong memory, the ability to connect with almost anyone and strike up a conversation. But if Mercury is challenged, meaning it's in the sign of its fall or its detriment or has some challenging aspect relationships, then that can indicate a sort of restlessness, scattered energy, and even a nervous tension because Mercury relates to the nervous system. And so that's going to be a system within the body that is going to be sensitive for Gemini. Gemini's symbol is the twins. And the twins are mythological characters, Castor and Pollux. One was immortal, and the other one was mortal, was a human. And when the mortal one died, the immortal one pled to Zeus to save his brother, and Zeus made them both constellation, made them immortal by placing them up in the stars. And so within the sign of Gemini, you have this duality. There is the mortal aspect, which is subject to all of the human drives and desires that make us humans here on this earth. And then you have this immortal, godlike spirit aspect. And so there's always this contrast within someone with a Gemini rising, Gemini sun, Gemini moon, where they want contradictory things. The Gemini rising does a really good job of integrating polarity, of showing that contrast and duality can be expansive if we accept both desires and understand where both desires are rooted for. The desire for freedom and for exploration and for having your own sense of autonomy leads you to explore all these different facets of life. And it can be open-hearted and open-minded. And then the commitment, the grounding in a relationship, in a job, in a steady, stable structure in our lives can provide a source of energy to all of that exploration. And so the Gemini rising embodies that. But to people who love a Gemini rising or who are trying to pin down a Gemini rising to sign a contract or negotiate something, you have to be aware of those contradictions. Don't be too worried about closing a deal. The Gemini rising is going to play with it in their minds before they solidify whatever it is they are committing to. Let's talk about some strengths and challenges. The strength of a Gemini rising is that they're very adaptable. These are people who can walk into any room and find common ground with just about anyone. They are charming, quick-witted, endlessly interesting, and they have a real ability to uplift others through writing, sharing ideas, and being thought leaders in the world. They have a brilliance and a way of thinking about things that can be inspiring and infectious. There are some challenges for a Gemini rising. One of them is focus. Gemini rising people often start projects, they start conversations, relationships with a lot of enthusiasm. And then sustaining that attention over time can be somewhat of a challenge. They thrive on novelty, which means that they can sometimes struggle with follow through. Not all the time, and a lot of it depends on where Mercury is in their chart, but this is just a general challenge that they often encounter. Gemini risings also need to watch out for overthinking things or talking about feelings instead of really feeling them. In fact, talkativeness and gabbing can be one of the ways that Gemini risings avoid their feelings or work through some of their own difficult feelings of being awkward or being uncomfortable in a space. A rising sign can indicate where tension builds up in our bodies, and it can show the stress points in our physical bodies that correspond to stressors in our lives. And for Gemini rising, the lungs are going to be really sensitive. It can be anytime you get sick, it goes right to your lungs. Also, the nervous system and the hands, the arms, motor skills. These are all Gemini related functions. Mercury can also relate to our ability to communicate with one another. So, hearing, talking, learning, sharing ideas. And so when a Gemini rising person is under a lot of stress, they might want to talk and talk and talk and not listen as much, or they might pull back and either come down with a cold that makes them have a scratchy, hoarse voice or lose their voice altogether, or they might just need to completely rest. I find that Gemini risings are so on the go. They can do more than most other rising signs in one day. And so they can be either really on or completely off. Mercury is an interesting planet because Mercury has a somewhat of a trickster energy and it keeps people on their toes. And so people with Gemini risings, this also applies to Virgo risings. People with Gemini risings might have a really sharp wit or sarcastic sense of humor. They might love playing games, using a play with words. These are people who can write poetry, who can compel others through the written spoken word. And they tend to have a real gift with being able to understand how to reach someone's mind and maybe even how to change someone's mind. The Gemini risings in my life have actually given me new ways to think about something. So that is incredible. So there is this dualistic nature within the sign of Gemini. And Gemini risings might appear as if they have two distinct sides of their personality. They are here to embody duality and to show that contrast can be integrated, contrast can be expansive, but they can sometimes be to others who have more fixed sign or steadfast rising signs. They can seem like they are walking contradictions, both wanting freedom and wanting commitment at the same time. And I see this play out a lot in personal relationships or with anything that they are dedicated themselves to. There's this pull between the two opposing forces that they're working to bring together. The other challenge that Gemini rising might face is that they love attention and they attract attention because they're so curious, quick-witted, because they're usually the kind of people that you want to talk to at a party. They can disarm you. You can learn things. They're very fun. They're very funny. But sometimes what can happen is that desire for attention becomes a need for attention. And then they could get into patterns of stringing people along, running away from commitments, or being the loudest voice in the room. Now, a Gemini rising can use that same tendency and skill set for building an audience, for public speaking, for politics, for things that they want to communicate and express in the world. It's important to channel that energy and not let the ego get involved with being the most interesting person in the room. Now let's talk about the physical appearance. Gemini rising has a youthful appearance, no matter their age. And I talked a little bit earlier about the eyebrows. There's like this curiosity about the eyebrows. A lot of this depends on other factors in the chart. What planets are in the first house, where Mercury is in the natal chart, what sign and house it's in, and other aspects. But in general, there is a lightness, a quickness, a liveliness about their body language, about the way they move. Their eyes are bright, curious. Their hands are really expressive, their movements quick. There's a lot of movement. You'll find that these are the fidgeters. These are the ones who want to be up, looking at things, and they have so much energy to spend. They might have a really agile and flexible body. They can appear thin wiry, with angular features on their face, and their voice is a really strong giveaway. Gemini risings often speak quickly with animation and variety in the tone. Here are some pictures of people with Gemini risings so that you can get a feel for them. Now let's talk about life themes for Gemini risings based on the house cusps. And we'll start with the second house, which is the house of money. It's the house of our self-worth. It's the house that relates to how we spend our money because it's connected to our values. It's also the house of our priorities. It also tells us about how our cash flow moves, how we bring in money, and the overall relationship we have with money. So Cancer is on that second house cusp. And the moon is the governing influence. It's the luminary that relates to Cancer. And so Cancer shows a need for emotional security, financial security. It can also indicate that the relationship with money is a very emotional relationship. Money ebbs and flows. A lot of times, Gemini risings earn money through their creative ideas, through nurturing their projects or other people's projects to fruition. Money floats to them. And so the more that they are creating resistance or pushing hard and working towards something and not letting the flow happen, the more they are blocking that cash flow. A Gemini rising is likely to spend money on comfort, security, on their family, gifts for others, their home. Their home is emotional safety and security. Real estate can be a way of earning income. It can also be a good investment opportunity for someone with a Gemini rising, depending on the quality and condition of the moon. Sometimes there can be extremes. Money ebbs and flows. For a Gemini rising with Cancer on this cusp, it's important not to let the ups and downs be overly concerning because there's a real tendency to be a freelancer or to have contract work with this position or to have a side hustle that you're investing in and building. There can be a lot of versatility, and your adaptability is one of your number one gifts when it comes to your finances. But you might have just this intuitive ability to know how to bring more income in when you need it. And that's because of the presence of the moon in relation to the second house. Now let's talk about the third house, which is the way that you communicate. It's your learning. It's how you get from one place to another. It's also your relationship with your siblings and neighbors. For Gemini rising, this is going to be governed by the sun. Leo is on that cusp. And so what we have with this placement for our Gemini risings, you shine your light when you are a storyteller, when you're a performer. There's a charisma with the way you speak and write. And you want to be expressing yourself, especially if your sun is in the third house or the fifth house, or if you have a Gemini sun or a Leo sun, or a sun that wants some kind of voice in the world. And singing and music and writing, speaking, these are all great activities that you could teach, that you want to learn. This shows where your interests are. When it comes to relationships and siblings, there might be a little bit of rivalry because Leo is governed by the sun. The sun is me. Look at me, pay attention to me. Sometimes you can have relationships with siblings where there's a contest for attention, or sometimes there can be this real sense of loyalty, but within that loyalty and that connection and that commitment, you feel like, does anybody notice me? When it comes to your neighbors, you might find that you are like a leader of some kind. You have the ability to bring people together, maybe get positioned in the neighborhood watch group or the PTA, something that lets you stand up as a leader in some way. This is a great placement for teachers, for speakers, public speakers, because you have that natural ability to connect your heart with your words. Now let's talk about the fourth house. The fourth house is your home, it's your family, it's real estate, it's your roots. And so it's what you need in order to sustain you and support you growth. Your home life is governed by Virgo. And Virgo needs a lot of order, a lot of organization, and also a lot of intellectual stimulation. So you might have little stations all through your house of different activities: the art station, the music station, the workout station, the TV room, because you need a lot of intellectual stimulation, but you also need a tidy, efficient environment. You probably have a lot of books in your home, a whole library, writing, projects going on all over the place. For you, your relationship with your family is an analytical one. You are interested in understanding why people are the way they are and why you are the way you are because of your roots and the people that you came from. And so there can be this analysis that you're constantly going through as a part of your own healing path. Your fifth house is governed by Venus, and Libra is on the fifth house cusp. The fifth house is the house of romance. It's the house of your creative expression. Think about it as the house of fertility. So anything that you nurture into being in the world, which is why it relates to your children, anything that you create. The fifth house also can be things like games and gambling and fun, where you find your joy. What's play to you? Those are all fifth house related things. All of these areas of your life are going to have a Venusian quality. So there can be this real love of connection, the love of being with other people, especially in a romantic context, a love of beauty, the desire to create beauty, and through artistic means, through beautifying your home, through what you wear and how you express yourself out in the world. There's also a real desire to have balance and harmony in your romantic relationships and in your relationships with your children. This makes you a natural artist, writer, performer, someone who's going to thrive in a collaborative creative process. Also, your children might be a representation of your creativity. In fact, you might have a desire for them to look a certain way, dress a certain way. Libra can be associated with our appearance, fashion, beauty, design. And so there might be an innate artistic talent with your first child or with all of your children. And that's something that you nurture for them. But there's a desire to have harmony in the home and not to have a whole lot of drama in your romantic relationships, even though that can be a little challenging because of that duality that we talked about earlier. The sixth house is the house of work, health, health care, and your general self-care and well-being. It also relates to your coworkers and colleagues. And your sixth house is going to be governed by Scorpio. And Mars is the traditional planet associated with Scorpio. Pluto is the modern planet. And so, what we could say about your work life, about your commitment to self care, is that it's very intense. For Gemini risings, you might be drawn to work in research, psychology, the healing arts. You're going to have a real need for disciplined health routines, ones that take you down deep, that connect the mind, the body, and the spirit. You're really interested in getting to the root of things and not just staying on the surface. Everything you do has that quality, which is why I see a lot of freelancers with Gemini risings, because you can go deep, intense into a project and then pull out and need a complete break. That can be one of the qualities of Scorpio, is having these extremes. The other thing I'll say about your professional life is that Scorpio wants it to be transformative for others. There is a desire for your work to have a lot of meaning and relevance to making the world a little bit better, making people's lives a little bit better, or just catalyzing change in some way. Now let's talk about the seventh house. The seventh house is our partnerships. It's the house of marriage. And you have Jupiter right there as the governing planet of Sagittarius on that house cusp. And so for you, partnerships are going to be adventurous. You don't want to get bored in a relationship. You want to continue to grow, to expand. You want your relationship to teach you things and your partner to be a thought partner for you. But Gemini rising is going to be drawn to a partner who broadens your horizons, who challenges your beliefs, who brings you inspiration, someone who can teach you things. And you also want to be understood. You want to attract someone in your life who wants to learn from you as well. And depending on where your Jupiter is one of the benefic planets. It's a planetary influence that encourages us to have what we desire and to work on having the best life possible. And so when you have Jupiter on this cusp, then there can be just this sense of spotlight. It's the planet that wants us to go big or go home, that can be associated with things like luck, opportunities, expansion. And when you have Jupiter as the governing influence of your partnerships, then this can be one of the areas of your life where you are growing, where there are opportunities, where you lock into a partnership that carries you further than you can go on your own. And so this is one of the great opportunities for a Gemini rising. And it's interesting because both Sagittarius and Gemini love their freedom and have this contrast of wanting connection, but also wanting autonomy. And so it's likely that you're going to be able to, Gemini rising, attract someone into your life who needs that balance too. I've seen people with these placements really stick in there and make commitments. It just takes some trust and faith that the relationship is going to continue to be renewed, probably through the adventures and experiences that you have together. Now let's talk about the eighth house. So the eighth house is governed by Saturn. It has Capricorn on that cusp. The eighth house is the house of our shared resources. It's also intimacy and how willing we are to merge with others, to share our lives with others. It is the house that relates to the deep inner workings of our psyche, our psychology, our sexuality. It's the house that relates to any kind of entanglements we have through debt, through IRS audits, through insurances. It's all of those kinds of things. And at the heart of all eighth house matters is really, do we trust ourselves to be merged with others? Do we allow ourselves to receive? For you, all of these areas of life, but especially your financial partnerships, feel weighted down with responsibility. And you might feel like there are limiting forces, like your partner has different ways that they want to use resources than you do. And this might be one of those areas of your life where you don't feel as free. But if you keep the long game in mind, have a sense of the big picture, this is a placement for long-term security, disciplined approach to money and to sharing resources, having a real plan for getting out of debt and not just letting things go. You can be laid back about other areas of your life, but this is not one of them because Saturn's influence says we need structure here in this area of your life. Now let's talk about the ninth house. The ninth house is the house that relates to your faith, philosophy, your religious ideology, your worldview. It's also the house that relates to higher education, long distance travel, anything that you get on a plane to go, especially anything in a different country. And for you, Gemini rising, this is a house governed by Aquarius, and Saturn is the traditional planet that relates to Aquarius. Uranus is the modern one. And Aquarius is a more unconventional sign. And so you might be drawn to unconventional spiritual paths, to progressive philosophies, to humanitarian causes, to nature being your religious experience, or communities being a focal point for your spiritual practices. I think of Aquarius on the ninth house cusp as someone who is taking a pilgrimage to an ashram and then stopping over at the Vatican for a tour of the Sistine Chapel. The idea is that you crave experiences, and there is this sense of adventure, and it's not just frivolous. It is coming from a real deep need to connect ideas and thoughts from different traditions and be able to communicate that and to be able to teach that. Everything you do is about what you can communicate back to others. And so I find that plays into the Gemini rising. Travel itself can be a spiritual discipline because you have to get out of your ego in when you're in a new country, when you don't know the language, you are in your pure flow state. And so that can be a spiritual practice for a Gemini rising. The other thing with Aquarius on that house cusp is that you might be attracted to higher education that is outside of the norm, that isn't your traditional experience, or that higher education becomes such a focal point. And a lot of this depends on where Saturn is in your chart, where Uranus is in your chart, and the condition of those planets. There's such a hunger for anyone with an air sign rising to want to learn, but especially with a Gemini rising, because Aquarius is the sign when it's on the ninth house cusp, it's the sign that wants to know and wants to see the big picture and all the nuances. And not just for the own individual knowledge, but really to be a thought leader and to know in order to teach, in order to speak, in order to share that and make the world a little bit better. There's a real humanitarian interest. Now let's talk about the 10th house. The 10th house is the house of career, but not always how we make money. That's the second house, and sometimes the eighth house, and not what we do on a day to day basis for work. That's the sixth house. The 10th house is that mission, it's that calling, it's the crown chakra point where we connect our spiritual urges with our day to day professional experiences. When you have a Gemini rising, your 10th house is governed by Pisces, which is traditionally ruled by Jupiter, and the modern planet associated with it is Neptune. Pisces gives you a real spiritual influence in your career. It can feel dreamy. You can feel very musical. There can be this creative quality to it that adds to that whimsical Gemini rising trait. You can thrive in the arts, in spirituality, in film, music, or anything that puts you in a compassionate role serving other people. But it's important to be clear about what you want and focused, because sometimes Neptune's influence and Pisces' influence can be a little foggy to where you might go through career evolutions where there's a period of time where things aren't flowing and it's just a creative time. Then the flow opens up and there's a lot of movement, adventure, and activity. And then that flow kind of ebbs. Part of this is because people with a Gemini rising have water signs on all of those career and money points. So the second house, the sixth house, and the 10th house. And when you have water signs on your money houses, the money flow in your chart can be, it comes in like big waves and then it kind of slows down. You're not supposed to be rowing against the current. And so when you have a pullback where your career just feels like it's kind of at a standstill or things aren't moving as they used to be or that you'd like them to be, then that's when you want to go into the creative space. That's when you want to do some reflection. Don't worry about it. The flow is going to open up again. It's just how things work with you professionally. Also, a Gemini rising needs to have multiple streams of income, multiple projects happening all at one time, and that's how you thrive. Now let's talk about the 11th house. The 11th house is governed by Mars. It's Aries on the cusp. The 11th house is our friendships, it's our groups, it's our connections. It's also our vision for the future. So it's the house that relates to our relationship with technology and our relationship with the future. Your friendships and group interactions are energetic, pioneering, and bold. This is a great activist placement if you want to use your voice for something that is making a political or a social statement. This is a great placement to do that, and you can rise into leadership in any group that you belong to. But there's this desire for dynamic connections, for communities where people are doing things. They're not just sitting around and talking about things, and we're not just at meetings over and over again, where there's actually like we're planning things. Things are in the motion. Also, adventure. So, this is a great placement for taking any kind of tours with groups of people, for doing anything that involves rallying people together for a cause, standing out with your protest signs. You've got this energy of Mars strong in that area of your life. You might go through phases where there are conflicts with friends or you're not seeing eye to eye. And so don't be afraid to back off from a friendship or to pull away from a group if you need some space or if you need to recalibrate. That Mars energy wants to start things, it wants to keep moving and not always stand still. And a lot of this depends on what planets are in the 11th house and the condition of your natal Mars. Finally, let's talk about the 12th house. The 12th house is governed by Venus, which is Taurus's planet. Taurus is on that cusp. And the 12th house relates to the things that are hidden, the things that we keep inside. For you, Gemini rising, there is a real craving for peace, for stability, for beauty. Your spiritual practices are rooted in the body, like yoga, nature walks, music. Those things help to bring you back to your centered place when the world is a lot. And you actually need stillness time because your nervous system needs to recalibrate. Yoga is a great way to do that. Walking in nature is a great way to do that. Anything that can involve movement and stillness and that contrast is really helpful for connecting you to the invisible realm, to spirit, to your inner self, to your own creativity. That would be something that I recommend. Also, it's going to be important for you to have a sanctuary space in your own home or apartment that you can practice stillness. So, having a reading nook or a meditation corner, somewhere that you can sit still and honor the quiet part of you, because that's a part of you that doesn't get a whole lot of attention with that Gemini rising. So make sure that you honor that. Hey, Gemini rising, now you know what it means to have a Gemini rising in all areas of your life and in all houses of your chart. So, Gemini rising, you are the cosmic storyteller. You bring energy, wit, and curiosity wherever you go. And you remind the rest of us to ask questions, to speak up, to stay curious and keep learning, to keep connecting. Now, your challenge is to stay grounded, to follow through, and to focus your many talents into something lasting. But your gift, your voice, your ideas, your adaptability is something that the world needs. Your voice, especially, the world needs. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode, for watching my YouTube. I am so grateful that you took the time, that you are here learning with me. If you are a Gemini rising, I would love to hear what you think. Post in the comments below, and I will be checking them frequently to hear your thoughts and your perspective. If you know someone who's a Gemini rising, send them this episode. Let them learn about themselves so that they can make the most of that rising sign and hopefully avoid some of those challenges. I'd love to hear from you. Next time, we'll be back talking about Cancer rising, the nurturer, the protector, the crab with a shell. So make sure that you catch that video. I'm trying to release these about once a week. So hopefully that'll be the rhythm that you'll find that in a few days to a week. So thank you all so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you Cancer rising next time.